Hello and welcome back to podKast with a K. I'm your host, Carla with a K, and we are back for another fine whatever evening with new nonsense. No new guest except for y'all. Y'all are the conversationalists today. We are doing a music roundup, which is fitting because we are here on WECS 90.1 FM, twitch.tv/CarlyGirl, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, Google, wherever it is that you get your podcast. You're here, and it is that time. Finally back, finally talking about some stuff, and boy, do I have stuff to talk about. Today, we are doing a music news roundup, because there has been a lot of music news, and I personally am very, very excited about everything that's happening right now. It's a good time in music for yours truly, and I will explain why. First and foremost, we just listened to Bad Bunny's, well, in Spanish it's EOO, you know, but in English it's EOO, from his newest album, which, if you've been under a rock, Bad Bunny's latest album has been going absolutely crazy all summer, all year, and in this, what is exciting is he just finished a month-long residency in Puerto Rico before kicking off a world tour and making a pit stop at SNL. And it is, you know, one of those things that you think is nothing but is something. So basically, world tour, yes, great, good. Skipping over the US, except for this appearance on SNL. For a very specific reason. That's right. Politics is back on the podcast. And it's a lived experience, so no one can flag me for talking about sensitive issues. Anyway, yes, Bad Bunny is not hitting the US on this world tour for the very specific reason, which we saw proof and confirmation of, which he said that he disapproved of the US's treatment of immigrants and didn't want to risk ICE camping outside of his concerts trying to get concert goers when they're trying to have a fun night out and spend their hard-earned money supporting the music industry, because, as you know, concerts generate hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs each year. And he wanted no part of that. The rest of the world, of course, gets to see him. Puerto Rico being a part of the US, if you're a US citizen and or able to travel from and to the US, you were able to go see him in Puerto Rico, especially if you had Puerto Rico type money. So no harm, no foul. And this, I think, was one of the smartest decisions possible. It definitely takes away people having to weigh the risks of, do I do this and have fun with my life, or am I going to be terrified of my entire existence, which is a very real thing. If you pay attention to the news, to social media, you see a lot of immigrants, whether they are documented or undocumented, expressing fear in doing things for leisure, in traveling, in going to events, in hosting events, in signing up for things, in applying to new jobs, because you never know who's going to be having a bad enough day to be like, this name has a little too many uncommon letter combinations. Let me get somebody in on that, right? And of course, as we've seen, it's not only undocumented immigrants being targeted, it's anyone that sounds a little different, that looks a little different, that acts a little different, and not even. It's also people who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, people who get defensive against the authorities. It's a whole ordeal. And like I said, I feel like this is probably one of the smarter decisions an artist has made in recent time, and one that, of course, everyone stands beside. But keep this in mind. This does not at all affect Bad Bunny specifically or solely. Of course, like I said, concerts generate hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs per tour, per year, per etc. And with that, of course, is affected everyone in the touring industry, right? That's venues, that's caterers, that's stagehands, that's, music engineers. That's a lot of people, And as unfortunate as it is, we are getting to see a taste of the impact that Bad Bunny has. And it's one that makes you think a little bit like, is the Illuminati real or not? By which I mean, of course, that Bad Bunny will be performing at the Super Bowl. This year's halftime show will indeed be Bad Bunny. And for the first week or so, I was so happy because everywhere I looked, it was just people celebrating this win, whether or not they listened to Bad Bunny. And, you know, after that week's worth of hype kind of died down, who was to take over but the haters? And so, of course, you start seeing people ask, who is that? And there's no way you don't know who Bad Bunny is at this point in time. I don't care who you are. There are household names, and he is officially one of them. And, you know, for what it's worth, the final show of his month-long residency in Puerto Rico was live streamed for 24 hours on repeat on Amazon Music, on Prime Video, and on Twitch, which is insane. And so with that in mind, you see the level to which Bad Bunny has grown, and it's very cool. It's very exciting. I feel like, you know, with someone of this stature, of course, they would be a shoo-in for the Super Bowl with the chaos that they had made. And it also gives American fans a chance to see him, even if it's for $8,000 at the Super Bowl. And like I said, we got confirmation of his fears, in which ICE made a public statement saying they would be at the Super Bowl. And like I said, he was on SNL, and SNL had a skit about it, or a bit about it on Weekend Update, which is, you know, that's exactly where ICE is going to be looking for undocumented immigrants, you know, farm workers who have $8,000 to spend on a Super Bowl ticket. But you know what? Let them be there. Let all of the diehard football fans doing the most American thing in America possible, let them handle that. Let them see what it's like to have to deal with the authorities and have to defend who they are, especially all of the people who identify as Latinos for Trump. All right? I want every single one of y'all. I don't pray on anyone's downfall. I don't wish ill upon anyone, but I want every single one of them to feel the weight of their actions and to feel the weight of their vote, and everyone else who isn't but happens to look it. All right? Because I've seen a lot of people from a lot of backgrounds have a lot of things to say. I just want y'all to understand the weight of what you do, because no one cares about something until it affects them. And it will affect you, right? There's that poem that everyone's been sharing, and it's a really good poem. But the final line is, I waited for someone to speak for me, but there was nobody left. Because basically, if you don't speak up for somebody, it's going to be you next. Because once they're gone, who's next in line? Right? You're kind of seeing that shifting of the times. And I've mentioned this a little bit here and there whenever we have done Politics Podcast. And it seems like we're getting into this a little bit more than I thought. I'm looking at my list of music roundup, and there's a theme here by accident, as per usual. Brain just works that way. But you see this happen a lot, in which one group of people is chosen as the target enemy for that time period, right? Whoever is the bad guy in the government acts like a middle school bully, in which they choose like their one victim, their one, adversary, their one rival, and that's who they go after consistently, right? In the time that I've been alive, we saw it happen after 2001 with anyone that was Muslim or Arabic. We saw it shift to, I guess, who was next in line, right? We saw it shift to Black people during the Black Lives Matter movement. We saw it shift to Asians during COVID. And now we're seeing this hit undocumented immigrants, specifically Latinos. And it's not a new thing. We've seen this historically. We've seen this with the Polish. We've seen this with Jewish people. We've seen this a lot of times in a lot of places. And I just find it so hard to believe that this happens so constantly. And, it's the people that argue that we need to keep up soldiers' statues or Confederate general statues because we need to know our history and we need to learn from our history. And yet these are the people who are refusing to learn from their history and see the patterns that lead us to extremist situations in which we have someone who is power hungry leading the masses and telling the masses, my group of supporters, my group of voters, they're so dumb. They'll do anything I say. They'll believe anything I say, and saying it to their face, and they're laughing and they're like, oh, but not me though, right? Not me though. Yes, you, specifically you. So all this to say, I'm really, really happy that Bad Bunny is the halftime show. And there have been rumors going around everywhere that, his appearance is going to be canceled because he's anti-American. And there's a lot of people engaged in the same conversation every single day. Puerto Rico is a part of the U.S. Puerto Rico is a part of the U.S. There's nowhere to deport him to. Puerto Rico is a part of the U.S. Where are you going to send him? There's there's nowhere to send him. There's nowhere to get rid of him. They're not going to cancel what's probably going to be one of the, again, highest watched shows because the people who they're trying to target are not going to be there. They're going to be watching on TV. that's what it is, right? And I feel like this is an interesting time in history to be living through. I miss precedented times, as does everyone. But I feel like we're going to see either a split or a moment of unity during the Super Bowl, right? And I'm really, really excited to see which one wins because, it's been kind of touch and go 50-50 here and there. I follow people of all backgrounds, of all beliefs, because I like to be informed of what everyone's saying, and I like to make informed decisions. Therefore, I'm very intrigued as to how this is going to play out. But that is that on the Super Bowl. Like I said, Bad Bunny did do SNL, which I think was amazing. He gave a part of his monologue in Spanish, which his opening monologue, in which he said basically that he dedicated his appearance and his performances to all the Latinos in the world, specifically in the US, because it's not just an accomplishment for him, it's everyone's accomplishment. He said that Latinos have made their mark and their contributions to the country, and that cannot be removed or erased by anybody. And he said all of this in Spanish, ending with, if you don't understand what I just said, you have 4 months to learn, which I'm of the mindset that I really hope he does the whole Super Bowl in Spanish. Everything he says, everything he sings, the entire thing. At the same time, maybe it would be cool for him to use this platform to address the masses. Time and place, I don't think he will. But if you've noticed a trend in the last few Super Bowl appearances, it's been critical, and it's been critical for a reason. These are people with millions of fans, people who love their country, people who live and die by their country, and people who are accused of being anything but, And it's unfortunate, and it's weird, and it's very much like, oh, but this is my country. You don't like it in the right way. And I'm like, this is exactly why we are all so upset. It's our country, too. Bad guys can't have it. And that's that on that, That's what it is. So this is a good pivot, I think, to a different topic of mine, in which, speaking of very American things, another very American thing is country music. And I have never been so taken aback as I was with this. This is something I came across while scrolling, all right? I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't doing anything. I've been working consistently nonstop, almost 24 hours a day. The only breaks I take are to sleep and eat for like the last couple of weeks, which, explains the gaps in the podcast. I know I said we were back. We were almost back. And then one of my project files corrupted, so I've been rebuilding it. But I was scrolling for fun, and I came across Zach Bryan drama, which is not anything I thought I would ever have seen and or cared about. Zach Bryan is a guy, which I've said before. And I've played country music on the podcast before. I don't hate country music. I like country music. I'm of the Bo Burnham mindset with country music, in which there's really good, really lyrically heavy, really musically creative country music. But a lot of it follows that same 4-chord stadium country feel, in which every song is the same and it's about beers and trucks, right? And that's kind of it. Zach Bryan, though, is not someone I would have ever expected in my entire life to say anything political, much less anything political against specifically the US. And so he posted a clip on Instagram, which I will let you hear for yourself.
Didn't wake up, dead or in jail. Some out-of-town boys been giving us hell. I got some bad news. I woke up missing you. My friends are all degenerates, but they're all I got. The generational story of dropping the plot. I heard the cops came. Cocky motherfuckers, ain't they? And ice is gonna come bust down your door. Try to build a house, no one builds no more. But I got a telephone. Kids are all scared and all alone. The bar stopped bumping, the rock stopped rolling. My middle finger's rising and I won't stop showing. Got some bad news, the fading of a red, white, and blue.
So that is a snippet that he posted, and all it says is the fading of the red, white, and blue in the caption. No explanation needed. Comments turned off. And I, you know, he's a kid from Oklahoma about my age, and it's crazy. You know, it's crazy that this is where we are. You know, the people who specifically are kind of grouped in with another group of people for their recently extremist beliefs it left me speechless. You know, it left me without much to say. And there's been, of course, so much weird criticism, right? And I don't understand this about the right. And I use the terms the right and the left kind of loosely because in America, specifically Republicans and Democrats, people don't realize both parties are a lot more central than you think. Although the center is kind of leaning right. Democrats are by no means, in the scope of the world, the far left at all. And you just have to read one book, one article, one news story to see that, right? I'm not just saying this from any perspective. I'm saying this as someone who likes to be informed, like I said. And I think it's interesting and it's unfortunate how we generalize. And, you know, I'm guilty of it as much as the next guy. But I was thinking about this specifically in the context of country music and in the context of other things that kind of lead the mind one way or another. And so specifically with country music, it's unfortunate because you do have people as noteworthy as Dolly Parton, who is known for being, you know, very not necessarily loud-spoken or with an agenda, or, you know, to use a unfortunately ruined word, woke, but someone who is very proactive with her presence, with her platform, with her performances, with her money. You know, like I said, it's very strange that we politicized a virus, but of the things that she did, she donated to COVID research. The reason we have vaccines to protect us against, you know, an illness that almost decimated us because we were told not to take it seriously by the government. I mean, we weren't told not to take it seriously. There was mixed, whatever. We're past that point in time. It's been like 5 years. But someone who donated, the reason that we're all sitting here alive and talking about it is because she donated the money to this cause. And you have the world of country music, which is being like, oh, these are all the ignorant fools on the right. And it's like, it's not all of them, though. You know, there's artists and there's fans who don't feel that way, who don't see that way, who aren't ignorant to the world. And, you know, that kind of extends down this train of thought kind of process that I was having. Like, it's weird how we generalize. And I was thinking about, you know, country music. I was thinking about Southerners. I was thinking about folks from Oklahoma, the same way we were talking about folks from my place. And, you know, it's interesting because there are some, like I said, I'm guilty of all these generalizations as much as the next guy, but I was thinking about this, I'm like, well, where do I fall on this? You know, I know whenever I say I'm from the Carolinas, you know, it's a fun topic of conversation whether or not that's a part of the South, because it's North Carolina, but there's a South Carolina, but the Carolinas are technically a part of the South. But where does the South begin and end? And, you know, if you're further north, are you different from the South? And I'm like, let's take a pause. All right. I live in a very strange, diverse bubble in a very strange, diverse state in a very weird pocket of the US where you'd think it'd be one way, you'd think it'd be the other. And oftentimes we're a little blue oasis surrounded by a sea of red. And again, these are not necessarily terms that I like or care for, because if you want to study it down to the facts, the right and the left don't really exist, especially nowadays. But what I find interesting is that the generalization is such that, you know, the South in general is considered ignorant and racist and rude and, you know, all of the aforementioned things. And what I don't like is that this gets kind of proven in situations like this, right? So, for example, we're talking about Zach Bryan having put out a song in which, you know, it's about bad news and bad things that are happening and how he's feeling disappointed with the direction that the US is going in, as, you know, much of us are. And I feel like it's unfortunate, and it's interesting to see the response, because there was a response from some guy. I think he's a journalist. I don't know who this dude is, man. I think he's another country singer, actually. And he said to in response to this clip from Zach Bryan, you know, who's ready for the Zach Bryan Dixie Chicks tour, which is a slight because everyone was mad that their name was changed, right, to the Chicks. And then he said probably a huge Bud Light sponsorship for this one, in reference to them collaborating with a transgender influencer. And then, you know, you start thinking about this, and then, you know, someone is in the comments saying that, oh, he's betraying Oklahoma. And it's like, well, why does all of Oklahoma have to be considered that, right? First of all, what's wrong with changing your name? Second of all, what's wrong with collaborating with an influencer, whatever their gender or identity or background might be? And then someone else goes and says the only thing fading is his career. Maybe he can go and perform for the Amigos. And it's like, you're reading all of this. And the one that I kept thinking about, of course, is he's betraying Oklahoma. And it's like, so Oklahoma's supposed to be a bunch of like dumb idiots? Like you don't realize you're devaluing yourself. And it's just crazy, because in the same comments, I saw something that said, well, I don't stand by Bud Light, but I still drink Bud Light though. And it's like, okay, we didn't need the disclaimer. And I was thinking, and I'm like, people who lean right tend to use a lot of disclaimers, like, oh, well, I'll listen to Zach Bryan, but I don't agree with what he said. Like, what? When is the last time you heard someone on the left have to defend who they listen to or what they buy or what they consume or who they voted for? I remember, we're deviating a little bit from the topic here, but, you know, train of thought. I remember seeing a friend's mom post something about, like, I know a lot of people are hurting right now because of the presidential election, and I just want you to know that, like, no matter who you're voting for, like, you know, politicians are not our heroes, and, you know, you just got to vote for what you think is right, and at the end of the day, we all still love each other. And it's like, yeah, but if you love someone, why are you voting for someone that's actively doing something evil, right? When you think about it, what's the left and the right doing? One saying, let's do this to change things, to make this more inclusive for everyone. Sure, it's going to break a couple of systems, but what system doesn't need reform, right? But you see what the right's doing, and it's like, I don't like that guy, I don't like that guy, I don't like that guy. And I'm trying to say this as, like, objectively as possible, of course. But, like, that's what a lot of these rules are. Like, this needs more restrictions, this needs more rules, this needs more control, this needs more figures of authority. And it's like, hold on, weren't y'all supposed to be the traditionalists, you know, preserving the right to be ourselves in our own places and having the states have the power to decide a lot of things? Because y'all are saying a lot of big decisions and a lot of blanket statements of what needs to happen and who needs to do what. It kind of seems like you're shifting your your ideals here. And so with that in mind, I was thinking about, like, other generalizations and other kind of stereotypes that we, like, impose upon others, and that I, you know, like, again, where do I fall? Because, like I said, I listen to country music, and I was like, have I ever, like, I listen to country, but I'm not one of those people. And it's like, okay, well, all right, well, let's think about situations in which I've done that. In what situations have I felt the need to, you know, give a disclaimer for something that I do, or something that I listen to, as someone who doesn't lean right, who doesn't have the choice to lean right, you know? Like I said at the beginning, Latinos for Trump, shut up. Women for Trump, every single one of y'all that likes to shoot yourself in the foot, I really hope you enjoy that Second Amendment, right? To shoot yourself in the foot, because that's what you're doing. And so I'm sorry, I'm getting riled up. Again, Zach Bryan was not on my freaking bingo card for this year. And I saw this like an hour before going live to record this show. So forgive me if my mind is everywhere. I've been having a lot of thoughts. And so I was thinking about, like, where do I fall on these stereotypes? And, like, where is it that I do what it is that I'm, like, not complaining, but, like, being critical about? And another thing, apart from country music, that I was thinking was, I actually think I shared a post on Facebook myself. And it was along the lines of, like, well, it was along the lines of separation of church and state, right? Because that's also another hot topic. That kind of goes hand in hand with this, with being a part of the people who are in the South and who listen to country music. And, you know, often tied up in that is Christianity. And so the Pope, for example, made a statement that said, someone who says, I'm against abortion, but I'm in favor of the death penalty, is not really pro-life. Someone who says, I'm against abortion, but I'm in agreement with the inhuman treatment of immigrants in the US, I don't know if that's pro-life. And it's funny because I have a friend who essentially I had this conversation with. She grew up more right-leaning than left. You know, she had military family members and who benefited back then more from the treatment of the right. Again, now that's questionable. And who grew up in a Catholic household, being against abortion and other such things. And recently I hung out with her and we were talking and she's like, yo, can I ask you a couple of questions? You know, like, have you been keeping up with the news? And I'm like, boy, have I ever. And we were talking about it and she was telling me like how her beliefs have changed. And she's like, and you know how I used to be. And like, I still believe the things that I believed, but I guess I didn't stop believing what I used to believe. I guess opened my eyes and accepted more beliefs. And I was like, oh, do tell. And she said that exact sentence. She's like, well, I don't know how I'm supposed to say that I'm against abortion. But, you know, how am I supposed to do that? But then, you know, the death penalty and they're, you know, the school shootings and they're killing immigrants. And, you know, I don't know if that lines up. And I was like, yeah, amazing point. Wow. And it's not, like I said, I'm not trying to convince anyone to lean either way because I don't think either side really, truly, purely exists anymore. And if you know me in real life, you know I've had my laundry list of complaints against people that I know on the left. And that's a completely separate podcast. But it was just kind of refreshing to have that conversation with somebody who has a belief system and managed to find a way to balance the beliefs they grew up with the new beliefs that they picked up. I just thought that was so interesting and so crazy because it's not something you hear very often, if at all. And with that like train of thought, like stay with me here. I was thinking, I was raised Catholic. We went to a Catholic church until I was like 10. Didn't like the hypocrisy at the specific church that we were in, so we didn't go there anymore, but we still kept our beliefs and traditions, you know. There's the prayers that you recite at certain moments in time. There's the saints that you invoke at other moments in time. Watch the Vatican's mass on Christmas on TV. Like there's some things that stayed through my life. However, from the moment where I was 10 until I was about 20 or so for about 10 years, I took music lessons, piano lessons, choir, etc. at a Baptist church. And so, you know how Baptist churches be, they kind of pull you in. They invite you to more and more stuff until basically I was doing everything except for actually going to Sunday service. I was there 3-4 days a week doing a different extracurricular activity. And it was fun and it was nice. And then people started mocking Catholicism here and there. And I was like, you know what? People have their mistakes. People have been taught a certain way. And it's when I started learning, like, different teachings lead to different beliefs. That's okay. I never took it personally. I never wanted to take it personally. It wasn't until I saw a kid walk in with a shirt that said something like build the wall. And I'm like, you're 9. You don't know what the wall means. And I was like, I don't think I'm coming back here. I think my time here is done. But, you know, with that in mind, I did 10 years as a Catholic, 10 years as a Baptist, and then I stopped going and I eventually kind of found myself stepping back into Catholic belief systems a little bit here and there. I still don't go to church, but like I have my things. And so I was thinking about this and I'm like, I don't often talk about religion. And for someone that likes having big talks and big controversial conversations and discussing philosophy and mythology and, you know, theology and everything else, why don't I talk more about religion? And I'm like, I'm the people that I complain about. I don't want to be associated and have to give the disclaimer like, oh, I believe in God, but, and the same friend that I was having this conversation with, the one with the beliefs that then opened her mind to new beliefs, she actually asked me like, you actually like believe like there's a guy with a beard on a cloud in the sky? And I'm like, I don't know if I'd put it in those terms, but I'd like to believe that my beliefs are real. However, I'm more of the mindset like some people might think this, some people might think that. I think there's a lot of interesting coincidences around the world, but like, you know, who am I to say who's right and who's wrong? We're not going to know until we know anyway. So I don't care, you know, like, I would say maybe, yeah, I'm a, yeah. Like I am a Christian, a Catholic maybe, but like, and then I found myself doing that right there. And I was like, why is it so hard for me to say yes? And I'm like, I feel the need to give that disclaimer. But it's like, how come my disclaimer is not, I did this, which is going to ruin someone else's life? So, you know, just know that I love you anyway. And I'm like, the thing that I might have in mind that's the most controversial might be religion, just because other people use my religion to hide behind while they're doing harm to other people. And so I was thinking about this and I'm like, you know, I don't feel called upon to preach. It's not my job. And so I saw this post on Facebook, of course, and I shared it, and I'm like, I think a lot of people forget that there are a lot of us who have more progressive ideals and progressive beliefs that still do believe in Christianity and religion and God, you know, in my boy Jesus Christ. Like, I feel like a lot of people forget that we are out here. And again, that's not to say that I really care what anyone else believes. I like my beliefs and that's kind of it. You know, that's all I can say about it. And I'm like, okay, so if I want to move forward without this critique of other people for living their lives and expressing themselves how they do, how do I reflect upon that myself? And I'm like, the only way to you know, to be an activist is through action, right? And it's like, I'm not preaching to convince anyone to convert to my religion. I'm preaching to convince people to just love each other. The biggest teaching that I was taught in that big holy book by every religious teacher out there is love your neighbor, leave the judging to God. And that's what we're supposed to all live by. And so there's been like a couple of, after this, of course, the algorithm is how it is. There's been a lot of different creators that show up on my feed who do just that. You know, they'll go to Planned Parenthood protests, or they'll go through Republican rallies, and they'll find those people who are like, oh, but the Bible says, and he's like, oh, does the Bible say? And he'll open it. He says, that says that in Leviticus, right? Well, Leviticus also says this. Do you live by this? And seeing people flabbergasted it gives me joy because that's how I argue, right? If you want to have a conversation with me, you're going to come with the facts and you're going to come with both sides in mind. And if you're going to come with one side in mind, that's fine. Know what you're talking about, though, because I probably do too. I like to research both sides, and I like to believe that there's more than two sides in the first place. And so with that sort of mentality, I've been trying to involve myself more in spaces where I'm seeing more conversations like that, because, you know, that disconnect where I was like, well, how is it possible that, you know, I've got friends and friends' families and et cetera, who are saying like, I made this decision, which I know is going to hurt you, but I'm standing by it anyway, but I still love you though. And it's like, I can't be critical of those people if I'm acting the same way about my things, right? And it's like, okay, let me not do that. All right. Let me be the first to say, I believe what I believe. Those people are doing it a certain way. The way I'm doing it is this. This is what it actually says to do. I feel like that's a good, well-rounded way to have that conversation. Of course, it's not a conversation everyone even wants to have in the first place, but it's how I like to discuss, and it's how I like to express myself. And it's, you know, I've like I said for the last few podcasts, like there's a lot of stuff happening in the world, so we're going to take a break from that. Unfortunately, the stuff that's, or fortunately, because it's giving me the space to talk about it, but let's go with unfortunately, the space that I have, which is free of all distractions, of all jobs, of all monetization, of all problems, is music, right? I like my good feel-good bops. I like the music that I like that has statements when I need a music that has a statement. But artists like Zach Bryan, Bad Bunny are not people who I turn to for political guidance. Not that they're bad at it. That's not where I go. One's party music. The other one's also kind of party music. I don't think about it. But it's just interesting that I've encountered this, and I'm like, man, all right, I guess we're addressing this now. So it's given me a lot of time and place to think about this and to consider this, and, you know, where I stand on some issues that I haven't thought about, because like I said, I miss living in precedented times. A lot of the stuff that people are learning right now are things that I've been known for years simply through the act of being, you know, name 5 identifiers here, right? Like it's crazy. And in different conversations that I've had, it's like, oh, well, if you've done this, this, and this right, then why is this wrong? It's like, yeah, that's the question. Ask the government. That's and that goes for, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, any identifier that you wanna discuss. And so, like I said, I encountered these things in music that I listened to, and so I was like, all right, music roundup. We're having this conversation. Join me on this train. And so it doesn't end there. We go to a more predictable place, being Hayley Williams of Paramore. Of course, emo music, punk rock has always been what it is, right? Like, it's not necessarily like the music of the rebellion, but it is considered rebellious music. It's where people go to make statements. I've talked enough about Green Day on here for y'all to know that, right? And again, a lot of the music that I listen to, even within like the emo punk rock scene, isn't necessarily that which is critical of any establishment or any system. It's more so, you know, about like just things are unfair and I'm angry, so I'm gonna be singing about it. And it's like, yeah, that's fun. Nice little blanket statement. My friends are, you know, wishy-washy today. Oh, my work sucks. I know. You know, like whatever. There's a lot of different topics and a lot of different songs, or, you know, the old faithful heartbreak and unrequited love. And so, you know, you have a lot of options for what to listen to. And I usually listen to stuff about other things, right? If I want to talk politics, I will just go look up politics. I don't want to hear that whenever I'm trying to have me time, chill time, I'm painting. I don't want to be thinking about what's wrong with the world. I want to be, you know, whatever. And so as it goes, Hayley Williams dropped a bunch of songs under her name, which was crazy. And we'll listen to some here. All right. So I've been talking for a million years. Let's listen to the first one that I want to discuss, which I think is a good transition, because in talking about Zach Bryan and country music, there's a song that she has called Ego Death at a Bachelorette Party, which starts with the verse, "I'll be the biggest star at this racist country singer's bar." And in an interview, she was asked about, you know, different country singer bars and like, does she like any of them? And she's like, no, Nashville kind of sucks. And she's asked like, which one do you like the most or do you hate the most? And she's like, well, Morgan Wallen. And I was like, girl, let's go. Morgan Wallen, of course, being one of the biggest names in country music right now, but consistently under fire for, you know, either saying the N-word or throwing chairs off of rooftop bars. You know, he does a lot and a lot wrong. And when he first came out, same as with anyone, I'm like, ooh, a new artist, let's listen to them. I have Morgan Wallen songs saved to my playlist here and there, older stuff mostly, but it was just nice to see an artist not hide behind, oh, well, you know, it could be anyone to begin with, putting this straight up in a song, a diss track, and actually saying who it's about it when immediately asked. Refreshing. I feel like a lot of artists have fallen into that fear of cancel culture. Again, a different podcast. But I was so taken aback by her not even hesitating. She said his name immediately. She didn't even need to think about it. You saw like the split second, like, do I do this? And then she did it. And I was like, amazing. Thank you so much. But this isn't specifically the song that I want to listen to. The song that I want to show y'all is also off of this album. That was just my segue. Because again, it's incredible how well this podcast lined up. The song that I actually want to listen to is True Believer, which we'll listen to first, and then we will discuss. Yes? Yes. Great. Good. All right. And we're back. That was True Believer by Hayley Williams. So let's go down a breakdown of these lyrics, shall we? Thankfully, Genius has notes here. But I like just seeing what people have to say. Like I said, I like being well-rounded and knowing what the people are talking about. So we have in the first verse a line that says, tourists stumble down Broadway, which is the district in Tennessee, not New York. This is an area known for its live music, specifically country and honky-tonk bars. As I mentioned, the previous song, also from the same surprise album drop, is the one that mentions Morgan Wallen's racist country bar. Next line says, Cumberland keeps claiming bodies due to multiple bodies having been found in the Cumberland River in recent years. And then the next thing says, our best memories were bought, turned into apartments. The club with all the hardcore shows, now just a grayscale dominoes, talking about gentrification and the forced like modernization with the brutalist revival type of moment. And the next line says, the churches overflow each Sunday, greedy Sunday morning. Specifically in the South, this is an issue, right? You see all these mega churches with all the money. Bro, quick deviation. What's up with Joel Osteen not having let people into that mega church all those years ago? I'm still mad about it, bro. You got money, you got time. I know it's a liability. You've got what it takes to rebuild. It's a national tragedy. Every single one of the recent tragedies in the last 10 years has just shown me that we've learned nothing from zombie apocalypse movies and shows. It's everyone's still on that survival of the fittest mindset. And it's like, you should have learned by now. We have to work together. That's how ants survive. They know they got to hold hands to float. We're the only species that's out here like, nah, I'm going to eat my homie instead of trying to work together to survive. Anyway, the verse says, gift shop in the lobby, act like God ain't watching, kill a soul, turn a profit, which is what I was talking about before, in which, well, in the grand scheme of things, where it's like, whose side are you on? Your politicians or God? Because you be saying both are important, so, which one's going to win? You act like one isn't, but then you say it's the most important one. I'm just saying, it's some discrepancies. And then we move on to a little bit further down. A lyric that I quite thought was very interesting. Well, a verse that leads to a lyric. But she says, they put up chain link fences underneath the biggest bridges. They pose in Christmas cards with guns as big as are their children. They say that Jesus is the way, but they gave him a white face, so they don't have to pray to someone they deem lesser than them. A lot to unpack here, right? But the fences under the bridges could be a reference to a number of things, being actual physical infrastructure meant to deter homeless people, or the fences as in the borders, guns as big as their children is enough said. And then we have that other line. Jesus is the way, but they gave him a white face so they don't have to pray to someone they deem lesser than them. You remember at the beginning of the podcast where I talked about how it seems like the world, if not just the American people specifically of a certain type, which let me not generalize because that's where we started. Generalizations are bad. Working on it. But you have, groups of people who, after 2001 and in today's day and age, tend to villainize people of Middle Eastern descent. Your biggest idol, you put him on a cross everywhere, is one of those people. And it's like, the whole song is like this. She says the South will not rise again till it's paid for every sin. She calls it Southern Gotham. A reference to a building apparently in Tennessee that looks like Batman's silhouette, but also the fact that Gotham was not always crime-ridden until it was taken over by greedy folks. Basically, the whole song is critique on hypocrisy. Specifically, it seems like she chose to make this album about Tennessee. I haven't looked into why, I gotta admit. But, it's a critique. And I feel like now, of course, is as good a time as ever. You've got to find a way to express yourself creatively. And I think that I'm not surprised, obviously. Hayley Williams has always been her, she says what she thinks and that's kind of it. An album this direct, I guess, and this overt is not something I was expecting in today's day and age. But I'm pleasantly surprised. And with Hayley Williams, this, of course, more expected. So I'm not as off-put from listening to this on the daily. But I feel like now there's a line, right, where even our entertainment is all very heavily I guess affected by the life we can't ignore. I feel like a lot of music, of course, has always been with the idea to send a message, and I'm not a stranger to it. Like I said, as a painter, I have studied and learned a lot in order to beef up my own creative knowledge because I'm self-taught, right? I do it as a hobby. But I've told y'all before, where in college I learned that the reason that murals are such a big deal, and political murals specifically, and political art, was actually driven by Mexico. Mexican muralists used to be, I don't remember if it was commissioned by people or by the government itself, to spread the word about things that were happening. It was the best way to get the word out. It was the best way to get a widespread message for everyone to see during high times of war and political movements. And so, that's a part of my roots by accident, in that I'm Mexican and also an artist who has done murals. And so the fact of the matter is that art has never been pure of statements and conversation starters and politics like people want to act, right? Everyone wants to say, oh, every song is woke now, every TV show is woke now, every whatever is woke now. And it's all they did was say that maybe you should care about people and that, you know, being mean is bad. I don't think it was really anything that crazy. But I digress. I'm shook, but I'm not surprised. You know, the one that I keep thinking about is honestly Zach Bryan. I'm very interested to see how this goes. You know, you can't say deport Zach Bryan. You can't say deport Hayley Williams. So I'm very, very curious to see where, if anywhere, this goes beyond just people being mad on Twitter. The one, of course, that I'm going to be keeping a closer eye on is the Bad Bunny Superbowl situation. Wondering if they're going to still, you know, stream that for free. Recently, it's been hard to watch the Super Bowl. They keep putting it behind paywalls. Imagine they do that because they know a lot of people are going to try to watch Bad Bunny because they can't go to the actual show. But, I mean, it is what it is. Our time is drawing to a close here, so I want to pivot one last time down this train of thought on the topic of Bad Bunny. Like I said, he was on SNL, and one of his skits was very funny. It was about K-pop demon hunters, of all things. And I'm like, all right, everyone in the world, including Bad Bunny, now knows about K-pop demon hunters. Let me give this movie a shot. My friends have kids, and everyone's been like, oh my god, this movie's actually crazy. And I'm like, I'm sure it is. I haven't seen it. I finally saw it. It's actually really good. And there's, you know, spoiler alert, tap out for the rest of the show. That's what the rest of the show is going to be about. Basically, it's a story about a three-part girl group, K-pop, of course. The lead singer's mom was a part of a previous girl group. These girl groups are not just girl groups, they're also demon hunters. And the girl's mom died when she was young, and so she was raised by one of the other singers and the other hunters, and she was taught that she had to hide a part of who she was because, lo and behold, her dad was a demon. So she's half demon, half human, but she's a hunter, and she's told to hide the demon half of her. So she's always fighting, etc., etc. And then from the demon world comes this guy, you know, another demon guy, and he's like, yo, let's start a rival boy band K-pop group, and that's how we're going to steal all their fans and take over the world and, you know, get all their souls and eat them for energy. And so the story goes on, all right? Those two finally meet. They start interacting. He tells her, like, you're not a mistake. You don't have to hide who you are. You just have to live with your shame, I guess, like all of us do. And she's like, well, you don't always have to live with your shame. You know, you can move on. You can forgive yourself. You can save yourself too. And he's like, yeah, doubt that. And so, you know, it goes on. Eventually he has to save her. And, you know, she, at this point, she's been exposed to the world for being part demon, and her friends who are hunters now know. And they're like, ugh, we can't be your friend anymore. How dare you? You lied to us. As most things go. But at the end of it, you know, whenever he like sacrifices himself for her so they can kill the greater evil for the greater good, and she tells the lady who raised her, like, I'm done hiding, this is who I am. And instead of it being like, this is who I am, I'm a demon now, she's like, this is who I am, I'm still who I am despite the fact that I'm a demon, which is, you know, I've always been a fan of you're more than your story and your background. When the guy sacrifices himself for her, she's like, no, I wanted to free you. And he's like, you did, you gave me my soul back, and now I give you yours, or something. And so it's like one of those stories which ends with like, accept who you are and then you can move forward. But she tells him, like, you know, you don't have to live with shame forever. You made a mistake, and that's okay. I feel like that's my takeaway by accident from these previous stories, right? Like Hayley Williams and Bad Bunny, of course, being less surprising that they would talk like this. I don't know who Zach Bryan is in his day-to-day life. I don't know who every country fan is, but I know a lot of country fans are like that, you know, and I feel like that's why you get a lot of people saying, like, I made this decision, which is bad and is going to hurt a lot of people, but like, I still love you. It's like, it's okay to say you made a mistake. You don't have to stand beside the mistake because you're too ashamed to admit you were wrong. And that's the realization that I hope people get to, because like my friend who grew up with very different ideas and beliefs than I did, was able to be like, I've accepted that those are beliefs that I have, but I've also accepted more beliefs. I'm like, oh, fantastic, phenomenal. That's called growth. I hope more people can be like that. It takes a big person to admit they were wrong. God bless America, God bless the podcast, and God bless you. Y'all have a great... For Podcast with a K, I'm Carla with a K, signing off. Return you to your regularly scheduled programming here on WECS 90.1 FM, or whatever you were watching on Twitch, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Have a fantastic week. I'll see you next time with new nonsense and maybe new guests. I leave you with the golden tones of HUNTR with the song Golden from K-Pop Demon Hunters.